So good morning, everyone. So we'll just wait for 2-3 more minutes because folks are requesting to join. Yes. Good morning, everyone. So we have a speaker for today's session, Nikhil Sahu. Nikhil, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay, great, great. So today Nikhil will talk more about diving into common AWS misconfiguration. So over to Nikhil. Nikhil, good if you can introduce yourself and then start the session. Yes.
Yeah.
And recording is also on, so it's all set. Yes. Over
Okay.
to you, Nikhil.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Just let me know if my screen is visible or not.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Now we can see.
Okay. So yeah. So hi everyone, and thanks a lot for joining in today's session. So basically, in today's session, we'll be looking into a few misconfiguration scenarios that are present in various AWS services, and these kind of misconfigurations are very common in nature and have been exploited a lot in the past. So yeah, that would be all about today's session. Uh, a quick introduction before beginning. So yes, I'm Nikhil Sahu, and currently I'm an undergraduate final year student. Along with that, I'm also interning in the cyber risk department at Deloitte. And my primary domain or focus is more into application security and network penetration testing. And I had also been involved in bug bounties, and I've received Hall of Fames from many companies Microsoft, Oracle, Sony, Apple, etc. And coming to the AWS security tools, I had built a couple of tools or scripts, which you could say. So Bucket Flaws was primarily built for the checking for various S3 bucket misconfiguration scenarios, and IAM Flaws was built for AWS IAM enumeration and looking into various privilege escalation scenarios. I also write a few blogs on security vulnerabilities and CTF walkthroughs, and I think I've also written a couple of blogs on AWS misconfigurations. So if you want, you can check that out on the blogsick.com. So that was all about me. And before beginning, I'm not kind of any kind of a AWS security expert or cloud security expert. So whatever we'll be covering up today, we would be more from an application security point of view. And what I mean by that is that one can actually find these misconfigurations while performing an application security testing. And once you find these misconfigurations, you can easily escalate it into a higher priority or a higher severity. So now moving on to the agenda of today's session. So we'll first move forward with why basically we are targeting the cloud, and more importantly, why we are targeting AWS especially. And then we'll start off with the misconfigurations part. So we'll start with the S3 bucket misconfigurations, and then we'll jump on to the AWS IAM enumeration, and we'll look into various various privilege escalation scenarios. And then we'll move on to the server-side request forgery vulnerabilities that are present on EC2 instances. And then we can end the session with Paco, which is an AWS exploitation framework. So why basically we are targeting the cloud? I mean, well, no doubt that migrating to cloud would reduce the risk of being exploited up to a certain extent. And it is also sometimes considered better than a traditional architecture approach, because your cloud provider would be responsible for providing all kind of powerful servers and also patching your servers. to protect you against all kind of known exploits. But the primary concern or the problem would be the things that are present inside the cloud and how securely configured they are. And more importantly, what about the access control mechanisms that are present at various levels? And most importantly, what about your API keys or your bucket names that have been leaked publicly? So like we'll be looking into all of these in much detail, like later on in the slide. Now, moving on to the real events. So I have listed out a few data breaches related to AWS misconfigurations. So the first up we have is the Capital One data breach. I think most of you must have already heard of it, like wherein the attackers were able to access one of their internal S3 bucket because of a server-side request forgery vulnerability, which was present on one of their websites, which was hosted on an EC2 instance. Similarly, the FedEx data breach, where the attackers were able to access one of their S3 buckets because like it had the public accessibility. Imperva data breach, where the attackers were able to access one of their database snapshots because of an API key that was being leaked in the public. And then we also have the Tesla data breach, where the attackers were able to access one of their S3 access key and secret key because of an unprotected Kubernetes console. And like then we also have the Beam data UPI, which happened I think very recently, where the attackers were able to access one of their S3 buckets because it had the public accessibility. And like there are a lot of other data breaches related to misconfigurations as well, which have not been included. And like these kind of misconfigurations or attacks have been like increasing day by day, which is why the organizations are now focusing more on the security aspect of these cloud providers. So what basically is AWS? For formality or introduction, so Amazon Web Services provides an on-demand cloud computing platforms and APIs to various individual companies and organizations on a metered pay-as-you-go basis. And these cloud computing web services provides a set of technical infrastructure and distributed computing building blocks and tools. And like few of the popular services include simple storage service, identity and access management, elastic cloud compute, virtual private cloud, and a lot more. And why basically we are targeting AWS is because like currently it is one of the leading cloud computing providers in the market, and it also has an edge over the other cloud providers that are available as of now in the market. And in terms of, if you see from a learning perspective, then it is like very well documented and it is very easy to learn and deploy, which is why like many organizations are shifting their servers from a traditional architecture to the AWS servers. So yeah, which is why we are targeting AWS as of now. And then moving on to the misconfigurations part. So we'll start off with the S3 bucket misconfigurations. So a quick introduction about S3. So Amazon Simple Storage Service, you could say, is kind of a simple storage service wherein you can build to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere on the internet. And it is also extremely durable, highly available, and you only have to pay for the amount of like space you're using. And and if you want to know more, like you can visit this particular link here. And buckets are something which you can imagine something like folders, and objects are like you can imagine something as files. So similarly, like you place files inside your folders. So in the same way, we like place objects inside our buckets. And all our bucket names are unique worldwide. So no two bucket names would be of the same name. So all are unique, and all these bucket names have like also needs to be associated with a region where the user needs to specify the region in which he or she would like to create the bucket. And here are a few URL formats through which you can access your bucket over your browser itself. So yeah, I mean that was all about the S3 introduction. And now before moving on to the misconfigurations part, what is very important to know is that we need to know the name of the bucket name, without which we won't be able to like check for misconfigurations. So I've tried to list down a few ways through which we can actually find the bucket names. So first up we have is that we need to read the JavaScript files, and it is very much important. And I've seen a lot of people don't actually read the JavaScript files, and doing so would actually you might miss out on some hidden stuffs or secret stuffs that might be present there. And like I personally have found out a lot of bucket names and API keys being revealed in the JavaScript files, and like sometimes it's just there in the comment section, and for some reason the developers they don't remove it before moving on to the production. So it is certainly worth a try. And you can also search for some keywords like Amazon AWS or S3, or you can try out with your different AWS regions like US East 1 or something like that in your proxy history of your burp suite. And there are also a few plugins available like Asset Discovery and AWS Security Checks, which might help you in the process of automation to find your bucket names. So yeah, that was all about the finding the bucket names from the contents itself. And then we have like try to generate errors as much as possible in the target application, because like you never know how that particular application is behaving, or what exactly that particular application is doing in the backend. So like the picture here is like one of the POC or situation which I faced. So this was basically a file upload functionality which was broken actually. So even when I tried to upload some kind of valid file image or a valid PDF, it wasn't taking, and it was showing me an error. And within that error itself, it was like revealing the name of the bucket. And this eventually led to a complete S3 takeover like later on. So like try to generate as much error as possible, and sometimes you just might get lucky. There is also another trick available, so like wherein you can append something like question mark torrent, and you can basically download that particular object as a torrent file. So let's say you have got something like example.com/abc. So try to append something like this. So example.com/abc question mark torrent, and if that particular object downloads as a torrent file, then you can confirm that yes, it has been fetched from a bucket itself. And when you actually open that particular torrent file in some text editor, then you would be able to see the name of the bucket in the file content itself. But like there's a catch here. So like Amazon S3 is not supporting BitTorrent protocol in all the AWS regions that have been launched after mid 2016. So you can try out with all the regions before this particular that have been launched before this particular date. So you can try out with something like the US regions, and you might get lucky. Then we also have something like many static websites use the domain name as their bucket name. So basically, there's a feature of AWS wherein you can convert your whole S3 bucket onto a static website. Now, for this setup to work, what Amazon says is that like you need to have both the name of your domain name as well as your bucket name of the same name. You cannot have different name for your S3 bucket as well as a domain. So like whenever you have got a doubt that this static website must be a part of some S3 bucket, so try appending something like s3.amazonaws.com after the URL, or you can also try something like s3.amazonaws.com / and then the name of the domain name. And if you're lucky, then you might see some like response from the AWS such as access denied, or you might see the directory listing for that S3 bucket. So it is like you can give it a try. And like it is also recommended to check for the DNS records of your domain, and especially like look for the canonical name record of that particular DNS record. And like for this, you can use the NSLOOKUP utility, or you can use any other DNS lookup online tools that are available. So, and again, like if you're lucky, then your domain name would be pointing to one, like in the canonical name, it would be pointing to one of the S3 buckets, and it might just reveal the bucket name in the DNS records itself. And like if any of these tricks don't work, then you can try something like tools such as Lazy S3 Bucket Finder and S3 Recon, and there are a lot of other tools that are available in GitHub as well. So what these tool does is like they take a seed word, a kind of your organization name, and then it would like apply all kind of permutations to brute force your valid bucket name. So if nothing works, like this is the last approach you can try. And there's also another trick: try to append a URL encoded value, something like %C0 or %AA and B4, so something like that. And if you're lucky, then you might see the bucket name in the error response itself. But again, there's a catch here. So like if your website is referencing to something like s3.amazonaws.com / the bucket name, then you would be able to see that particular bucket name in the error response. But if your website is actually referencing to something like bucket name.s3.amazonaws.com, then this particular trick won't work. So then we also have another great tool, which is named as Grey Hat Warfare. So basically, this is a tool, or you could say an open searchable database that contains around 70,000 open S3 buckets containing interesting files, and bucket names of files could be easily searched using different keywords. So we can have a demo of this particular tool. So this is the particular website, and here you can search file as well as your bucket names. So we can search something like by placing a keyword here, let's say password, and we can also like include or exclude file extensions. So as of now, like I've included text and document files. And once we do that, like it is going to list out all possible files that actually matches with this keyword. And we can see like all the password file name that have been stored in the public S3 buckets. And similarly, we can do the use the same search functionality for the buckets itself. So you can search for some keyword here, and you might see a few bucket names here itself. So like that was all about finding bucket names in various ways. So next up we have is that like we'll see how basically we are setting up bucket permissions and what are the different ways. And this is actually very important if we need to understand that where exactly the misconfigurations are taking place. So first up we have is the IAM policy. So basically it is a policy that are applied over user groups or roles, specifying that what kind of permissions are allowed or denied to a particular AWS service. So in simple words, like what we do is we basically attach a policy document. So what is a policy document? Like in the picture itself, you can see. So that is a kind of a policy document. So whenever you apply this particular policy document onto some AWS entity, so let's say a user or a group, then that particular user would be able to inherit all the permissions that we have specified in the action parameter and would be able to perform all those operations on that particular resource that we have specified in the policy document. And if you see in the picture itself, I mean, there are a lot of parameters to look into, but let's just focus on three parameters here, which is effect, action, and resource. So effect basically specifies like what exactly we want to do with this particular policy document, whether we want to allow it or whether we want to explicitly deny these permissions. Action again like specifies what all permissions we have or we want to give, and resource specifies that like these kind of permissions would be applicable on what AWS resource or services. So as of now, like we have placed the S3 bucket, which is named as Cloud Session 1232. So like that was all about IAM policy. And then we also have something like bucket policy. So bucket policy are pretty much similar to your IAM policy, but the difference being that is like in IAM policy, we attach the policy document over to a AWS entity. So let's say a user or a group. But in bucket policy, we attach the policy document over a particular S3 bucket. And policy document is also pretty much the same, but we have an additional parameter which is named as principal. So what principal specifies is that who all users would be able to perform these operations on this particular S3 bucket. So in the picture itself, you can see we have given the principal parameter with an asterisk sign or a wildcard. So what this means is that basically all the users would be able to perform these operations, that is get object and list object, on this particular S3 bucket, which is named as Cloud Session 1232. So yeah, that was about bucket policy. And then we also have something like bucket ACL or the bucket access control list. So this is basically, you could say, an old way of managing S3 buckets or a legacy way. And like this is actually not recommended by AWS as of now. So AWS recommends to use either bucket policy or IAM policies. But the advantage here is that you can control access level, like not only, I mean, you can set access level not only at a bucket level, but also at an object level. And access could be given to various AWS accounts using their canonical ID or their email ID. And access could also be given to a certain predefined group that are present in AWS itself. So we have got three particular AWS groups that have been predefined by AWS itself. The first group is the all users group, which specifies like all the users, whether you have a valid AWS account or not, would be part of this particular group. And then we also have authenticated users group, which basically specifies like all the AWS users that have a valid account registered with AWS. And then we also have the log delivery group. I mean, this group basically has the permission to write access log objects to the bucket. And after that, then we have something like ACL permissions. So we have got like around 5 ACL permissions here. So the read permission basically like when it is applied onto a particular bucket or particular object, then like we would be able to list all the files that are present inside a bucket. And when the read permission is given to a particular object, then we would be able to view or download that particular object or that particular file in that bucket. Similarly, when read ACP permission is specified on a particular bucket or object, then we would be able to like fetch the access control list of that particular bucket or object. Again, write permission is, I think, self-explanatory. So when we apply this permission over a bucket or object, then we would be able to basically modify, upload or delete some files in that particular bucket. We also have something like write ACP permission, which is very risky to provide to all users group. So like whenever we apply this particular permission, then we would be able to like modify the permission of that particular bucket or that particular object. Similarly, full control is also a risky permission and should not be provided to the like all the users. And full control permission basically comprises of all the permissions that we have specified above. So whenever we apply a full permission onto some user, then that particular user would be able to perform whatever he wants on that particular S3 bucket. So like it would give him the complete S3 administrative access control over that bucket. And so this is like a one-to-one relationship between your ACL permissions and your bucket policy permissions. So like whenever we are applying something like read ACL permission on a particular bucket in the front end, so in the back end, actually these three particular, bucket policy permissions are being set in the background. So whenever we set read ACL permissions, then S3 list bucket, S3 list bucket versions, and S3 list bucket multipart uploads permissions would be set in the background. So like this is what the relationship between your ACL permission and your bucket policy permission is. Now moving on to the misconfigurations itself. So I've tried to list down a few ways through which misconfigurations can actually take place. So like first up we have is the wildcard, which is set as a principal or action unintentionally. And this would lead to a bucket being exposed publicly or could lead to giving administrative access to the whole bucket. So like here is a test bucket which I have, which is named as test1232. And to this particular test bucket, I have attached the bucket policy. And as you can see, we've got our two parameters here, which is principal and the action parameter. And like as you can see in the principal parameter, I have specified it with an asterisk sign or with a you could say a wildcard. Now again, like what this means is that all the users would be able to access this particular bucket and would be able to perform these operations specified here. Now, in some scenarios, these might be risky. Like let's say for an example, you have got a S3 internal S3 bucket, and you've also got some sensitive files stored inside that bucket. So obviously, you want that particular S3 bucket to be like being exposed to a normal user or a public user. So which is why it might be risky at some times. And similarly, in the action parameter, if we like specify something like this, S3 colon and then the asterisk sign. So what this would do is this would basically give us the full administrative access to that particular S3 bucket. And when we combine these two, so like when we apply a wildcard to the principal parameter as well as apply a wildcard to the action parameter, so then basically all the users would be able to perform all kind of operations on that particular S3 bucket and to take over that particular S3 bucket. So it is certainly not recommended to use these like dangerous wildcards. And we also have something like S3 list bucket permissions, which are set along with your S3 get object permissions. And this would lead to a directory listing of the of your S3 bucket. So let's say you've got a website, and that website is actually like using a S3 bucket to host all of its static file contents, like let's say your images, your CSS files. Now for this setup to work, all you need is the get object permission. You won't require the list bucket permission. So what list bucket permission does is it would allow you to list all the files which are present inside that bucket, which is absolutely unnecessary for a public user. Now I'll give you an example. So during like one of my S3 bucket testing activities, wherein I was given a bucket to test, and like that bucket was pretty much secure, but like it had this particular additional permission, which is why I was able to view all the files that were present inside the bucket. And like that bucket was only supposed to contain images, like image files and nothing other than that. But for some reason, there was a sensitive Excel sheet. Basically, that was an audit report that was like conducted by a third-party vendor. And only because of the list bucket permissions, like I was able to like know that this particular file actually existed in that particular bucket. And then using the S3 get object permission, I was able to like download that particular file. Now, if the list bucket permission wouldn't have been there, then obviously I wouldn't have been like able to know that this particular file name actually existed in that bucket. So like these kind of additional permissions should be avoided and should not be provided to a public user if it is not required. So yeah, and then we also have something like all users or your authenticated users group, which is given full control or the right ACP access. So like as we had seen, so what all users group is, like basically it comprises of all the users, whether you have a valid AWS account or not. And authenticated users group like specifies all your AWS, I mean all your users that have a valid AWS account. Now, when you give the full control access to these particular groups, then basically like literally everyone could be able to perform all kind of operations on that particular S3 bucket. Now, even in case of authenticated users, you could argue that it is only like given to the users that have a valid AWS account. Even if you don't have a valid AWS account, you can simply register with AWS on a like 12 months free trial basis and simply take over that particular S3 bucket. So full control accessibility is like very much risky when you're giving it to all users or the authenticated users group. And we also have something like the write ACP access. So even this is risky as well. Now, if you provide only write ACP access on the all users or authenticated users group, so it is true that you won't be able to perform, like you won't be able to list the buckets, you won't be able to view the objects, you won't be able to perform anything, but you would be certainly able to change the access control list of that particular permission. So what the attackers would do is it would like use this particular permission, the write ACP permission, to change the permission from write ACP to full control. And once they get the full control permission over that particular bucket, then you can do like whatever you want with that particular S3 bucket. So like these kind of permissions should be avoided and should not be given to all users or authenticated users group ever. And like a few slides back, we had seen like how basically we can set permissions on various buckets. Now imagine a scenario where like you have specified, like you have set up your bucket ACL and you have also specified your bucket policy. Now, how would your S3 bucket know like which one to use and which one not to use? So basically in S3, the bucket permissions are evaluated like based on your union of your IAM policies, your bucket policies, as well as your bucket ACLs. And the one thing to note here is that your explicit deny would always override an explicit allow, no matter in whatever order it is defined. So we can visually see this in the dashboard itself. So this is my test bucket, and as you can see, I have attached a bucket policy here, giving like kind of a restricted permission. I only have given read permission to the to all the users, and here, like you can see, I also have my access control list set up, and for this, I have provided the all users group with the list objects and the write objects permission. Now, the misconfiguration here would be like, let's say like we had applied this particular permission or the access control list while we were working in the production. And once we moved on to like while we were testing in the testing environment, and while we moved on to our production, we realized that access control list is like is not being recommended by AWS like as of now. So we attached a bucket policy onto it, and since it is on production now, we have applied restrictive permissions, like we have only given read permissions. But like even after attaching this particular policy, all the users would still be able to perform like would be able to upload files onto that object, like files onto that particular bucket. Now why they would be able to do so? Because of this particular access control list, which the administrators must have probably forgotten before like moving on to the production. And as we said that basically it is the union of your access control list, your bucket policy, as well as your IAM policy. And you can also argue that here, like we can see clearly that your bucket policy is set and your access control list is set as well, because you can see the public keyword here. But usually that is not the scenario. So like an organization consists of like it contains around 100 to 200 to 1000 buckets, and all of these operations are performed by your automation scripts. So because of which all of these things are like misconfigured, and these access control list or your bucket policy are like there itself, and we forget to actually remove it, which is why the misconfigurations takes place. Yeah, so then we also have something like flawed group names like authenticated users, which creates a lot of confusion. So the confusion is here because like many administrators or developers think that authenticated users is a group that basically comprises of all the AWS users that are a part of that particular AWS account that owns that particular S3 bucket. But it is certainly not that kind of scenario. So as I said, what authenticated user means is that any user that has a valid authentication with a AWS account, and even if you don't have a valid AWS account, you can simply register it on a free 12 months trial basis. So like then all the users would be able to perform all kind of operations on that particular like S3 bucket. So flawed group names like authenticated users creates a lot of confusion as well. like these were a few misconfiguration scenarios through which misconfigurations can actually take place on a particular S3 bucket. Now moving on to the AWS CLI. So AWS CLI is a kind of you could say command line interface which is provided by your AWS itself, and like it provides all kind of operations that you can normally do from your dashboard itself. And this is also very much important because we'll be using this particular AWS CLI tool to like check for misconfigurations and to exploit it. And installation is very much easy. So you just have to type in apt-get install AWS CLI in your Linux machine, or you can also like install it with your Python pip module. And again, configuration is also very easy. You just need to type in AWS configure, and it is going to ask you for your access key and your secret key of your AWS account. Now, how do you find this particular access key and secret key? So these kind of keys you would find while creating your user itself. So once you create your IAM user, in that particular process itself, it would give you your secret key and access key. You can save those credentials in some text file, and when it is required, you can enter those credentials when asked. And the syntax is also very simple. So all the commands like start with the AWS keyword followed by your like AWS service, and then the command or the function that you would with which you would like to proceed forward with. So yeah, like that was all about AWS CLI. And like we can have a little bit of demo of this. So configuration is again very easy. You just need to type in AWS configure like this, and it is going to ask you for your access key and secret key. So I've already set up. So I'll just hit the enter button, and again you can like paste your secret access key here. For the region name, like you can specify your like your region of your choice, or you can also simply enter like hit the enter button to like set it to a default region. And for the output format, also hit the enter button for setting it to a default default output format, which is the JSON format. And once you're done, so like you're good to go as of now. So AWS commands are something like this. So you can type in AWS followed by a, let's say, an AWS service. So let's S3 or let's say EC2. And let's assume that you don't know like what kind of service you want to use. So you can type in AWS help like this. And here like it is going to list you all these kind of services that are available over this particular CLI. So let's say like we are going to perform something with S3, and then we again don't know like what exactly command we want to like proceed forward with. So again we can type in help, and like if you move downward, this is like going to list you the commands that you can actually perform with this particular AWS service. So let's use this particular copy command. So let's type in cp, and then again let's say we don't know like how exactly we want to copy from a local machine to a S3 bucket, or from a S3 bucket to a local machine. So for that, again you can type in help, and once you do that, in the example section, it will show you an example of how to particularly like run this particular command. So here is the example. So AWS S3, and then we copy the local file that is present in your local machine itself onto a S3 bucket. So like this is how you can run the like AWS CLI commands. You don't need to remember anything. You can go through the documentation. Even if you don't need to, even if you don't want to go through the documentation, you can just hit the like help utility of AWS CLI, and it is going to like walk through over that particular like commands that are available with this particular CLI. So yeah. Now we have something like Bucket Flaws. So Bucket Flaws is a tool or a script which you could say. So it is basically a lightweight bash script that was built by me, and it basically scans for like AWS S3 bucket misconfigurations, and it also tries to exploit it with some additional features as well. And it can perform like both authenticated as well as an unauthenticated scan. And the scanning is done both at a bucket level as well as at an object level. And in the background, it uses the inbuilt AWS CLI command only to like check for misconfigurations. And you can check this for a single bucket, as well as you can provide a list of buckets in a text file, and you can supply that particular file over to that tool itself, and it would like help you with the scanning process. You can do this whole process like manually also using the CLI tool, but like I have tried to build this tool in order to save some time, in order to automate the process. So yeah, and here is the GitHub link. Like if you want, you can visit this particular link and download that. And so for the demo section, like we'll be using that test bucket in order to see like how misconfigurations are taking place and how we can exploit it. So we'll be like performing misconfiguration checking on this particular bucket, which is named as test1232. And this is all you need to know about, like for checking for misconfigurations. All you need to know is the bucket name. So one thing to note here is that I'm currently logged in. So this is a different virtual machine than the previous one. And in this particular machine, I have been logged into a different AWS account. So I'll show you in a minute. So this is my current, you could say, account ID. And this is actually different to the account ID who owns this particular bucket. So if we move to this security credential part here, so under the account identifiers tab, you can see here, this is the AWS account of this particular, this is the ID of this particular account, which owns the particular S3 bucket named test1232. And this particular account ID, and as you can see, this particular account ID are different. So this is a completely different AWS user, and we would like basically scan for misconfigurations from this particular AWS user. So we'll be using the bucket flash tool in order to check for misconfigurations. So you can type in something like bash bucket flaws -h to like list out all the possible commands which you can run with. So this is the most recommended way. So it starts with bucket flaws followed by a -u sign, which specifies the bucket name. And then we have 3 additional flags. So -o is for like whenever you specify -o flag, then it is going to like enter the object-based analysis, and it would also check for misconfigurations at an object level. And whenever you specify -p, then it is like the script would try to modify your access control list of that particular S3 bucket. And whenever you are applying -d option, then basically the script would try to download the whole S3 bucket onto your local machine. So we'll move forward with this particular command here. So -u, then followed by your bucket name, which is named as test1232, followed by -o flag, -p flag, and the -d flag. So it started with an unauthenticated access check. So as you can see, like it was able to view or list all the files that are present inside this particular bucket. And it was also able to upload a particular file like onto this particular S3 bucket. And like as you can see here, there's no upload.png file when we first checked using the unauthenticated access check. And then we uploaded a file which is named as upload.png. And when it entered the authenticated access check, and when it like tried to list out all the files again, and so you can see here we have got the upload.png file. So basically it was able to upload that particular file successfully. And we have also something like possible interesting files or folders. So what this basically like how it works is, I'll show you in a second. So I've got something like sensitive file.txt inside that particular repository. So basically this file contains a list of keywords, and the file names that are present inside the buckets are matched with these keywords. And if there is a match, then it is going to show you that some kind of possible interesting files or folder exists. Now you can like actually modify it, and like you can change it up to you, and it's completely up to you. So you can come up with your own word list as well. So like that was all about interesting files. And then it is going to ask you so yeah, it also tried to dump the full bucket over to your this particular directory. So if we move to this particular folder here, so you can see here, so we have the bucket name which is named as test1232, which basically it was able to download. And then when we move inside test1232 bucket and do a ls here, we can see like all the possible files that it was able to download. Yes, there are a few that it won't be able to download, like as I had said, in a bucket ACL you can set permissions not only at an object level but also at a bucket level. So if we don't have a specific read permission on a specific object on a bucket, then we won't be able to like download that particular object as well. So yeah. Then it is going to ask you that do you want to enter the object-based analysis or not. So let's hit in yes. And then it is going to ask you like enter the object name or the file name with which you want to proceed forward with. So let's copy this particular file name here and paste it, which is aws.sh. And once we do that, it is going to like retrieve all the information related to that particular object here. So like as you can see, it was able to fetch the object access control list. And as you can see here, so the full control permission is provided on the all users group, which is again very risky. And it was also able to fetch the object metadata here. And it is going to ask that whether you want to dump this file or not. So like we already have it, so we won't require it now. So let's type in no. And again, this is going to like say like whether you want to change the object or file access control list or not. We can type in yes, but again, it won't be of any use because we already have the full control permission over that particular object. So we anyway have full access to that particular object. So let's type in no, and then it's going to ask you that do you want to like proceed forward with another file. So again, let's type it no. And like then it is going to fetch for some bucket access control list, your bucket policy. And it would also be like it would also try to upload a file over to that particular bucket. This is basically performed from an authenticated scanning. And like as you can see here, we were not able to like fetch the bucket access control list, or we were not able to like fetch the bucket policy. And we were also not able to change the bucket access control list, but like we were able to like upload that particular file which is named as bucket.png. Now why basically like we were not able to fetch is like as we can see here in the access control list present here, we only had given list objects and write objects permission. We had not given read bucket permissions and write bucket permissions, which is why we were not able to fetch the bucket access control list or to modify that particular bucket access control list. And now let's run a scan again. So let's disable all these permissions here, and let's just enable this particular write bucket permissions. So as of now, we only have write bucket permissions. So let's run this particular tool again over that particular bucket. So as you can see here, we don't have the permission to upload a file, so which is why it failed. And now you could question that how is the directory listing possible here, because we don't have the list objects permission set up. Yes, we don't have the list objects permission set up here, but as I said, we have the read permission or the list bucket permission here in the bucket policy as well. And like as we had read before also, so permission is calculated based on your union of all these access control list and your policy. So which is why directory listing is still present on that particular bucket. So it will again ask, do you want to enter the object-based analysis? Let's enter no. And now basically it would try to fetch the bucket access control list here. So as you can see, all of this would fail. So as you can see here, it was able to actually change the access control list from write ACP to full control, but it was not able to fetch the bucket access control list or the bucket policy. So the reason is again very simple. We only have write bucket permissions. We don't have read bucket permissions, which is why we have converted this particular permission to full control. Now we can actually cross verify this. Let's reload this particular page here. So like as we can see here, now this particular bucket has all kind of permissions, and we would be able to, like all the users would be able to perform all kind of operations and would be able to like simply take over this particular S3 bucket. So yes, I mean full control and write ACP permission is like very dangerous and should not be given to all users or authenticated users group. So yeah, like that was all about the S3 bucket misconfigurations. Now, so now like we'll move on to the AWS IAM. So AWS IAM is like you can say something like a kind of a management service wherein you can create and manage AWS users and groups and use permissions to either allow or deny their access to AWS resources. So in very simple words, what we can say, it is kind of an authorization mechanism in the AWS environment, and it is used to set users, groups, roles, policies in order to give different permissions to different entities. And your AWS IAM consists of your identities and resources. So identities include your users, groups, and roles, and your resources include your S3, EC2, and RDS, like all kind of AWS services. So IAM identities consists of your user, group, and roles. So user, I think, is self-explanatory. So it basically represents a person or an application with which you would like to interact with AWS services. Group is again self-explanatory. So it basically comprises of all the it basically comprises of a list of users that have the same needs, and this is very much useful for like assigning and managing permissions to multiple users who have the same needs. Roles are something like you could say kind of a similar to IAM user, but like instead of being uniquely associated with one person, a role could be assumed by anyone. And role are usually used by your AWS services. So let's say, for an example, you've got an application which is hosted on an EC2 instance, and that particular application like wants to fetch or like needs to interact with your S3 bucket. Now for this setup to work, like you would need to create a role and attach that particular or associate that particular role with an instance profile. And once you attach that instance profile to an EC2 instance and you launch that particular EC2 instance, then you would be able to, I mean, that particular application would be able to assume that particular role which is attached with that EC2 instance. So mostly it is used by your by your AWS services. And also the role does not have a standard long-term credentials like your password or your access key, which we had seen in your AWS IAM user. So basically when you assume a role, it provides you with a set of temporary security credentials, which includes your access key, your secret key, as well as an additional session token. And your what you call your secret key and your session token are kind of temporary security credentials, and it has a time duration after which it would expire. So yeah, that was all about identities. And we have something called as policies, and policies are very important because policies are where we would be like using in order to escalate our privileges in a IAM environment. So policies, you could say, are a set of like a collection of permissions like which we apply onto a particular identity, and that particular identity, let's say a user or a group, would be able to perform all kind of permissions that we have specified in that particular policy document. Policy are of like globally of two types. So we have got managed policy and inline policy. So again, managed policy are of two types. So we have got something like AWS managed policies. We have got custom managed policies. So AWS managed policies are something that comes pre-built with AWS itself. And all of these AWS managed policies has a specific policy ARN. So ARN are kind of a, you could say, unique ID that are associated with every AWS resource. And similarly, custom managed policy are something which are created by ourselves or by a customer or a user, and it is not managed by AWS. And also custom managed policy are associated with a particular ARN number. And then we also have something like inline policies. So inline policies are the policies that are only associated with a particular IAM identity. So let's say you have got a user which is named as Tom. So then you can create an inline policy for Tom, and that won't have an that won't have a public ARN ID, because of which it won't be like you won't be able to attach that particular policy document onto some other user or onto some other group. So that particular inline policy is only associated with your particular group. If you want, we can visually see it also. It would be much clearer. So here is a policy tab, and within this policy, like we can filter policies. So we can filter something like AWS managed policies here by enabling these options. And once we do that, it would list us all the managed policies here. So here are a list of all your managed policies. And when we filter with a custom managed policy, okay, for some reason I'm not able to access my particular yeah. So like if you can if you move on to this particular option here, and if you type in like enable this particular custom managed policy, and then here we can see all the policies that are created by me. And you can also create a new policy by clicking the create policy here, and you can, like, it would guide you through the steps of how to create a policy. And if we click on this particular managed policy, you can see that I have a ARN here as well. And similarly for the managed policies also, like AWS managed policies, you will have a particular ARN. Now if I move to my user section, and let's go to this particular AWS test user here. So I've got a lot of policies like attached to this particular user. So here you can see that I've got a few inline policies here, and like there is no option to click here, which is why like you don't have a policy ARN or something like that. And these particular policy, like this particular Oscar policy, is only associated with this particular user, which is named as AWS test, and you cannot like attach this particular policy onto some other user or group. So it is only associated with this user. So like that was all about policies. And now when we talk about misconfigurations in your AWS IAM, so what we mean by that is misconfigurations are nothing but excessive permissions that are provided by our administrators or someone of the higher authority. And like for checking for misconfigurations, one thing you must have is your AWS keys, which includes your access key and secret key, because it is a post-exploitation approach. And Rhino Security Labs had actually come up with a list of like 21 possible privilege escalation scenarios. You can, like, if you want to know more, you can actually go through this particular link here. And how do we check for misconfigurations or privilege escalations? So we basically enumerate as much as possible. So we basically like would enumerate your policies, your attached policies, your inline policies, your group attached policies, your group inline policies, and all possible ways through which we can actually enumerate all kind of permissions. And I mean, it's not possible to go through all the 21 privilege escalation scenarios here, obviously because of the time limit. So we'll go through only 4 possible ways as of now. And regarding your like fetching AWS keys, I mean, like there are an infinite number of ways through which you can actually get your AWS keys. So I mean, there is not a certain predefined way to actually search for AWS keys. So you can try out to search for AWS keys in the GitHub repositories or something, or any such public repositories available. You can like also search for like API, like AWS keys in your bucket itself. Like sometimes we get AWS keys stored in your S3 bucket also. And you can like use Google Docs to again search for S3 buckets, like S3 access keys. And if you're lucky, you might get one. And also, like as we had seen in the data breach section, I mean in the data breach slide, where the Tesla data breach happened because like the attackers were able to access one of their S3 access key and secret key because of an unprotected Kubernetes console. So I mean, there are an infinite number of ways, and there's no predefined way. So you can come up with your own technique and method to find out AWS keys. And yes, also try to search for your, I mean, try to read JavaScript files. As I said, I have found out a number of times where I have like received AWS keys just embedded in that particular JavaScript file. So yes, now moving on to the misconfigurations. So first up we have is the new policy version creation. So what this does is it would basically lead to creation of a new version of a policy, and it would also like allow you to set it as the default version. And the permission required here is the IAM create policy version. Now, like in simple words, what this means is that there is actually a feature of AWS wherein you can have multiple versions of a single policy. So let's say you've got a policy which is named as cloud, and that particular cloud policy can have like multiple versions, like your V1, V2. like up to v5. You cannot have more than 5 versions of a particular policy, and at a time you can only enable one particular version. It's not like you would be able to enable all versions, and it would be a union of all those versions. So it's not like that. At a time you only would be able to like enable only one version. So what this whole scenario does is, when you basically like input this particular command over your terminal, it basically uses your create policy version module with a policy ARN, which specifies your ARN of the policy with onto which you would like to create a new version by attaching a policy document file. So in the policy document file, so we would be attaching basically a file that would have our action parameter as well as our resource parameter set to a wildcard. So basically this would give us like the full access, administrative access to that particular account. And then we also have something like set as default flag, additional flag. So what this does is it would create a new policy version of that particular policy. And once it has been created, it would set that newly created version to the default version. So basically it would enable that particular newly created version. And on doing so, basically we would be able to have full administrative access on that particular AWS account. And then we also have something like policy attachment to a user. So basically this would allow a user to attach the managed policy to itself, and the permission required here is attach user policy. So again, what this means is that when we have attach user policy, we would be able to attach ourselves or to some other username. We would be able to attach a username to a particular managed policy. It could be a AWS managed policy, or it could be a custom managed policy. So in the command, you could see we have used attach user policy module with a username, specifying the username with which like you would like to attach the policy. And in the policy ARN, we can specify the ARN of that particular policy, like which you want to like attach with. You can specify the ARN of your AWS managed policy, which is the administrative access policy. And on doing so, basically we would be able to attach the administrative access policy onto that particular user, and we would be able to have full administrative access over the full AWS account. Then we also have something like adding a user to a group. So this would allow a user to add themselves to a group which they're not a part of. So like basically like when you have a permission to list all the groups in your AWS account, then you also have add user to group permission. And let's say you've got a group which has administrative access, then what the attacker can do is it can attach itself to a group which has the administrative access, and then it would inherit that particular permissions, that group permissions, which is why that particular user would also be able to like have the administrative access of that whole AWS account. And then we also have something like setting an inline policy for a user. So this would basically allow us to create a new inline policy or update an old inline policy for a user. And the permission required here is put user policy. So whenever we have this particular put user policy, then we can basically create a new inline policy, or we can also update an old inline policy by attaching a policy document specifying the action and the resource parameter with a wildcard, which would eventually give us the full administrative access over that particular AWS account. Now, like there might be times when like these scenarios won't be looking vulnerable if you see it from a singular point of view, but it might be chained with different permissions in order to reach your end goal, which is to escalate it to a higher privileges. So let's say you have got a scenario something like this. So you have got the add user to group permission, but your particular group does not have that particular, let's say the whole administrative access. However, that group has a permission to like attach group policy. So now what the attacker would do is it would first like add himself to that particular group. And once the user is like part of that particular group, and then using the attach group policy, it would attach the group with a policy specifying the administrative access policy. And once it has done so, then all the users that are present in that particular group would be able to like escalate the privileges to a higher privilege, let's say an administrative access account. So I mean, there would be times where you would need to like chain all of these permissions, 3, 4, 5 permissions in order to reach your end goal. So it all depends on your like methodology or your technique. So IAMFlaws is again another tool or script which you could say, which I had built along with my one of my colleague named Shivram. And what this basically does is that it performs AWS IAM enumeration. It scans for all AWS IAM misconfigurations, and it tries to escalate your privileges along with, and also it has some additional features like checking for CIS benchmarks. And it performs enumeration of all AWS IAM users, groups, and its associated policies. And then it performs privilege escalation based on the scanning result or your enumeration result. And like this tool is still under development and we haven't completed as of now. So as of now, we have only integrated all the privilege escalation scenarios related to your users and groups. And we haven't been able to like integrate your role-based privilege escalations, and we'll be doing it very soon. So yeah, and here is also the GitHub link. If you want, you can go here, and instructions are there like how to download and what to do. So it's very simple to download and run this particular tool. For the demo purpose, like we'll be using one of the practice lab, which is named as Cloud Goat. So it is kind of a online practice lab related to AWS misconfigurations. So we'll be solving one of the scenarios of the Cloud Goat practice lab. So as you can see here, so creating that particular lab is very simple. Once you install it, you just need to run Python 3 cloud.py, create, then your scenario name. And if you enter the scenario directories here, we have got a list of scenarios here. So we'll be basically performing this particular IAM, like this particular scenario, which is IAM privilege escalation due to rollback. And once we do that, we would be getting a set of access key and your secret key, using which we can proceed forward with. And you can visually see it. So as you can see, we have got an additional user here, which is named as Rain or CGID. And once we enter this particular user, we can see that there is an attached user policy here, which is named as CG Rain or policy. And if we click on this particular policy here, and since it is a managed policy, we also have a ARN number associated with it. And if we move on to these policy versions here, as I had said, like you can create multiple versions, like up to 5 versions of a single policy. So like you can see here, version 1 is now the default version of this particular policy. So version 1 policy document would now be implemented, is now implemented on that particular policy. So what this scenario wants us to do is that it wants us to check for all the versions to see which of these version has administrative access privileges, and then we can set to that particular version in order to provide us with a full administrative access. So let's configure with this access key and secret ID here. And now let's paste our secret key in the configuration itself. Let's leave the default region and the default output as it is. And once we are done is we can verify our permissions or our user using the sts get caller identity command. So as you can see, this is our current user with which we have been associated or logged in into. So for this purpose, we'll be using IAMFlaws tool. So running this tool is very simple. We just have to type in bash and then IAMFlaws.sh. And once we do that, it is going to list you all the options that are available. So we have got something like CIS benchmark check. We have got enumeration. Then we have the enumeration, and then it would proceed forward with a privilege escalation scan. But we would be like proceeding forward with this particular option, which is option 4, where it would start with enumeration phase, and then it would enter the scanning phase, and then it would able to like exploit those privilege escalation scenarios. So let's type in 4. Would you like to save the complete output? Let's give it a no. So as you can see, this is our current user, and this was all the users that are associated with that account. So let's proceed forward with this particular user since it is our current user. So as you can see, list groups and list user policies have failed because, like as we had seen, we don't have it like assigned to any like user group, or we like or like we could say it wasn't assigned to any inline policy as well, but we had a attached policy, like a managed policy, and this was the permission that was set with that particular policy specified here. And these are a complete list of allowed permissions, and we don't have explicit deny permissions. And here it entered the privilege escalation scanning part, and as you can see, it has almost failed in all the possible scenarios. But in the second scenario, we can see here setting the default policy version, it specifies that it is possible to escalate privileges to setting the default version to an existing version. So then again, it will go into that exploitation phase, and you can see that we have the set default policy version here, and here it will list out all the policy, like all the policies that are associated with that particular account, and it is going to ask you specify the policy from above. Let's copy this whole, like as of now we only have one policy, so let's copy this whole ARM and paste it here itself. And like once we do that, it should give us the permission of all the versions that are associated with that particular policy. So this might take a few time. So yes, as you can see here, it was able to enumerate all the permissions of all the versions associated with that particular policy. And this is our actually V1 is our current default policy with these kind of permissions allowed. And we want something such as a wildcard set to action and resource parameter. And as we can see, we do have action like action and resource parameter specified to a wildcard. But in the effect section, as you can see, we have specified, like it has been specified with a deny permission. So this is not what we are looking for. And now if we move on to the version 4 of this particular policy, we can see the action parameter and the resource parameter are specified with a wildcard, which would basically give us the full control over our AWS account. And also in the effect parameter, it has specified it as allow. So this is what we are looking for, the V4 version. So it is going to ask you specify the version with which you would like to escalate your privileges. So type in V4 here. And once you do that, you can see that privilege escalation scanning is now complete. Now we can cross verify this again by running this particular tool. And for now, let's just focus on the enumeration part because we don't have to escalate privileges again. Let's copy this user here and paste it. So as you could see, it was able to list the attached policy, and it was also able to fetch the permissions which that particular policy contains. And we can see here it has got the full control over that particular AWS account. So I mean, yeah, that was one kind of a scenario of privilege escalation in AWS IAM. But that was all about AWS IAM enumeration and privilege escalation scenarios. Now, moving on to the EC2 server-side request forgery vulnerabilities. So a quick introduction. So Amazon Elastic Cloud Compute, we can say, is kind of a cloud-based virtual machine service, wherein you can launch as many as virtual servers as you need, configure its security and networking, as well as manage its storage. And it also enables you to scale up or down to handle changes in your requirements, and reducing your needs to forecast traffic. And it would also eliminate your need to invest in hardware, so that you can focus more on the development and deployment of your application. And if you want to know more about EC2, you can go to this particular documentation page of EC2 and read that particular documentation there itself. Now moving on to the misconfiguration of the vulnerability itself. So basically what SSRF is, so server-side request forgery is kind of a web security vulnerability that actually allows an attacker to make a server-side request or make a HTTP request to an arbitrary domain of your attacker's choosing. And in some cases, the attacker might cause the server to make a connection back to itself or to other web-based services within the organization's infrastructure, or to some, like, let's say, third-party systems. Now, like, what this means in very simple words is that whenever you have this particular vulnerability, an attacker would be able to make a request from the server itself on your behalf. So like the request would be coming from the server rather from your from the attacker. And what would be the impact is that using this vulnerability, you would be able to fetch some internal file locations or intranet applications or some restrictive file contents, or let's say some what you say some third-party web services which might give us some sensitive data. And what is an instance metadata is? Instance metadata is basically data about your instance that we basically use to configure or manage our running EC2 instances, like our public and private IP address that are in use, our security groups, our AMI ID using which we have created that particular EC2 instance, your instance profile keys, and a lot more. And instance metadata can be fetched by visiting this particular URL here, which is the 169.254.169.254 URL with this particular endpoint. And this is basically a link local address, and you would be, and because of which you would be only able to like request this particular URL from the EC2 instance itself, and you won't be able to access this particular URL from your browser. So yes, like, and when a IAM role is basically assigned to an EC2 instance, then the access keys of that instance profile can be fetched by making a web request to that particular like this particular URL. And in a typical SSRF scenario, what would happen is, let's say you've got a website which has a SSRF vulnerability in one of the vulnerable parameters, and that particular website is like hosted on an EC2 instance. And on that particular vulnerable parameter, let's say URL parameter, we can call this particular URL, which is the 169.254, this whole particular URL. And on doing so, we would be able to fetch the temporary security credentials of that particular role that has been assumed by that EC2 instance. And by fetching these security credentials, you can basically impersonate that particular role, and you would be able to perform all kind of permissions that that particular role is been assigned to do so. The whole vulnerability here is because of the server-side request forgery vulnerability that is present on your website itself. So there isn't any kind of misconfiguration from the EC2 side or from your AWS side. So whatever misconfigurations are happening or vulnerability is happening is only because of your server-side request forgery that is present on your website. But like, these kind of attacks were being very common and were being exploited a lot, because of which the reputation of Amazon was also going down. Like, which is why they came up with a new version, which is the instance metadata service version 2. And this basically acts like a kind of defense against these kind of SSRF attacks. So what it does is, in this particular version, we first need to make a put request to this particular URL with the endpoint latest API token with a custom header XAWS EC2 metadata token TTL seconds. And once we do that, we'll be getting a token, and this token would be the header value of the header name XAWS EC2 metadata token. And with this particular header and the header value, we would be able to make a GET request to that particular instance metadata service, and we would be able to communicate with that instance metadata service, and we can exchange credentials. But like the scenario here is like 95% cases of the server-side request forgery scenarios, you won't be getting these kind of privileges. So all you would be having is like you would be having a vulnerable parameter through which you can make a GET request to some external web services or to some intranet applications. You won't have the privilege to like change the HTTP work method or to add an additional header. So in 98% cases of the scenario, this won't be the case. So which is why this would certainly act like a layer of defense. But again, this is kind of an optional security fix. And as I said, all of these things are actually performed by your automation scripts. And for implementing this kind of version, the organization has to like modify their whole automation script. So which is why they won't be modifying it very soon. So there is a high chance that IMDS v1 would still be used by a lot of organizations. So it is certainly worth a try. So whenever you find some SSRF vulnerability, so you can try out for this particular method, and with this you could easily escalate your severity to a critical level. And again, for demo, like, we'll be using one of the online practice challenges, which is the flaws.cloud. So yeah. So basically, this is the challenge that we are going to solve, flash.cloud level 5. And I can read you the description here. So this basically says is that this EC2 has a simple HTTP only proxy on it, and here are some of its example. And the end goal here is that like see if you can use this proxy to figure out how to list the contents of this particular bucket, which is the like basically the level 6 bucket. So this is the particular bucket that has a hidden directory in it. So if we open this in a new tab, so you can clearly see here that access denied message is shown, and there's a message here. Level 6 is hosted in a subdirectory, but to figure out the directory, we need to play the level 5 properly. So there is something like subdirectory here, which we need to find out. And once we get that particular subdirectory, we would be able to proceed forward with the level 6. So like as you can see here, we've got a proxy server here. So if we open this in a new tab, let's say if we copy this particular link location here. So in order to check this proxy, what we can do is we can visit something like ifconfig.co. And as you can see here, like this is my current public IP address. And if we request the same URL from that proxy server itself, so let's remove the HTTP protocol from here. So here you can see the IP address is completely different than my IP address. So like I mean that request is actually coming from a proxy server and not from my IP address. So like what we can do here is, as I said in the SSRF vulnerability, we can request that particular like link local address URL or the instance metadata URL. And on doing so, we would be able to fetch the your temporary security credentials. So let's copy this whole URL from here. And like once we hit the enter button, it is going to like list you the instance profiles that are present. So Flaws is the name of the instance profile. So let's append this particular instance profile after your security credentials. And now like once we hit the particular instance profile, you can see we have got our token, our secret key, as well as our access ID. So let's just input all of these in our AWS configuration. And also one thing to note here is that whenever you like configure something such as AWS configure and you complete the whole process, then in your home directory there would be a directory named as .aws. And once you enter that particular directory, when you do a list command, and like there are a lot of files present here, but initially there would be only two files, that is config and credentials. And your credential files would be storing your access key and the secret key, and your config would be basically consisting of your default JSON format and all those kind of informations. So I'll just modify my particular credentials. So let's copy our access key first. Then our secret access key. And then we can copy whole of the token value and paste it there itself. So save this particular file and move this particular so let's do an ls, and if we move this particular token to the credential file. We do a cat credentials here. And as you can see, we have set up our access key, secret key, and our session token. And this is kind of a temporary security credentials, which has a time limit. So what this basically, like this challenge, what we have to do in this particular challenge is, so it is written here that we have, like, if you can use this proxy to figure out how to list the contents of the level 6 bucket. So this is the name of that particular bucket. So let's see like what we can see within this particular, or what we can list down with this particular bucket. Let's copy it from here, do AWS S3 ls, then with S3 // So like as you can see here, there's an hidden parameter which is ddcc, something like that. Let's copy it from here, and we can append it in the Cloud 6 URL here. And as you can see, we would be now be able to perform the challenge of level 6. So like this scenario was a like kind of a pretty much you could say replica of the Capital One data breach which happened because of the SSRF vulnerability. So yeah. Then we also have something like Paku, which is basically an AWS exploitation framework. So Paku is an AWS exploitation framework which was actually built by the Rhino Security Labs. And like we have got many AWS, like we can say we have got many AWS scanners, which could be said as the Nessus of the cloud. But this was prepared for the, like we could say this was prepared for like viewing it for a Metasploit of the cloud or AWS. And it is also a very useful tool because like it has a lot of modules and it covers almost all AWS misconfiguration related to all kind of AWS services. And the GitHub link is also here. We can have a very quick demo of this. I won't be showing you like the process, but let's just running this tool is very simple. Just type in Python 3 paku.py, and then it is going to like ask for a session. You can create a new session here with the 0 option. And then it is going to ask whether you like to name this session. So cloud session. And once you're done, it's going to list out like what all commands you can fetch with this particular tool. And the first step is that we need to set our keys. So we can type in set keys here. And once you do that, it's going to ask for your key alias. So type in anything here. And then it is going to ask you for your key ID, and you can enter it there. You can enter your secret access key, session token if you have any. And once it is done, it is going to save your key to your Torch database. And then you can do a ls command, which is going to list out all the modules you can perform. So it has got a lot of modules related to all kind of AWS services. So if you want help in any kind of modules, you can type in help IIM something like enum permissions. And once you do that, it is going to like list out like how you can basically run this particular module. And running this also module is very simple. Just type in run and then particular module name. And once you do that, I mean, this won't work because we don't have any access key set. So I mean, this is how you basically run this particular paku.py Paku tool. And it is a very good tool. Like if you want to perform any kind of AWS security testing, then this is certainly worth a try. And it also has an additional like brute force permission here. So in basically privilege escalation scenarios, what we do is we basically like try to enumerate all the permissions. Now, let's say we don't have the permissions to actually enumerate all the policy permissions. So what we can do is we can proceed forward with this IAM brute force permissions. And what this basically does is it would like brute force all kind of permissions related to AWS, and it would list out like all the permissions that are available. So yeah, I mean, that was all about like today's session. So I would like to end this session with an ending note, which was basically a statement which was given by Gartner. So which says that the realities of the public cloud security is that almost all of the cloud security failures have been attributed to customer actions, and there's been a lot of breaches where people have people have just left the things open on the cloud, open to everyone. And this is actually the elephant in the room when it comes to cloud security, as we are opening ourselves up to the naked internet with no controls, which I believe is very much true, because whatever data breaches we have seen as of now, maximum of those are because of the misconfigurations by administrators or developers. And like as everyone says in our infosec industry, you can always mitigate your technical vulnerabilities, but you would always come across misconfigurations because of the mistakes that have been conducted, or because of the mistakes of your that are performed by your humans. So yeah, and if you want to practice more, like you can follow these labs here, Floss.cloud and Floss2.cloud. They've got also 2 versions of Cloud Code. And I think we also have 2-3 challenges related to AWS misconfigurations in ctf.live as well. And here I've listed out a few references. If you want to know more about these topics, it is certainly like worth a try to like. You should certainly go through all of these blogs, because there's a lot of information here, and you could learn a lot from all of these blogs. So yeah, that was all about today's session. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Nikhil,
Yeah.
we have some questions in chat box.
Okay.
Can you check it?
Yeah. Please share the PPT. Yeah, I'll be sharing the PPT with Hariom later on in this after this session. Which is a better way to configure S3 bucket, whether through bucket policy or IAM policy? So like if it is a something kind of a public bucket where you are using something like to like for a static website hosting, or like for hosting images and all, then you can use bucket policy. And if it is a kind of an internal bucket and you want to give very strict permissions, then IAM policy should be set. The file uploaded through unrestricted file upload, as it is it execute in S3 bucket using URL? Yeah, basically you can do it using the put method itself in an unauthenticated scan. So you can upload it using the put method, and like it's very simple to upload it. You can also do it using the curl method here. So this is the particular curl method using the put option, put http verb method, and you can specify the file that you would need to upload, and this would, if it has the permissions, then it would be able to upload that particular file onto that bucket. How to enumerate IAM permissions for a compromised user? So like as I said, you can use IAM flaws also for enumerating permissions. You can use Paku also. It has got a few modules with which you can proceed forward with. There are also a few tools that are like built for enumerating IAM permissions only, such as Scout. I think Scout something like that. And you've got AWS Inventory. You've got enumerate IAM. So you have got a lot of tools like with which you can try with. And you can also visit this particular GitHub repository here. So like this consists a list of it's a huge list. It consists a list list of all the tools that one might require while performing an AWS assessment. So you can go through all of these. Yes, you can also use with a hyphen profile in order to add a different profile. So yes, you can certainly do that. And configuration is also very simple. All you need to do is you need to type in something like AWS configure profile, and let's say Nikhil, and you can just hit anything like this, and it is going to set you up with your this particular profile name. And whenever you are running any particular command, so AWS then something, then always include this particular profile Nikhil parameter. Yes, I can directly input keys and session tokens in credential files as well, but like eventually it would reveal my own AWS credentials, which I don't want to do that. So that is why I did in that way. Uh, does anyone has any more questions, or like we can? So I think that is it then. Hariom, if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more question, guys? So now we can conclude. Thank you, Nikhil, for your time.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, thanks a lot, guys, for this session. It
Thank
was a
you.
bit lengthy, but thanks a lot for your time and your patience. So yes, stay safe and stay home. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, guys.
Nilesh, call is completed. You can exit the call.